this transportation infrastructure investment, how can we better ensure that infrastructure projects benefit local economies? I'd specifically like your opinion on how we can ensure the inclusion of minorities, women, veterans, and other small businesses as primes or subcontractors on these infrastructure projects, thereby creating a more diverse workforce.
Thank you, sir. Transportation projects are often, if you look at the breakdown of our members as associated general contractors, we're made up of some large companies, but a lot of them are smaller, family-owned or individual-owned businesses. A lot of those businesses will go out and are investing in capital and infrastructure to actually get those projects done. There's structure in place on the federal projects right now, as you're aware, with the DBE program for disadvantaged business enterprises, and that has tended to work well in some areas. There are some improvements that we think that can be made to make it more accessible to others. There's some issues with the registration and situation with the DBE program. The cost, if you are a startup company, to go into the registration process and to get certified, some of those things tend to be cost prohibitive to some of those communities as well. The second thing that we think needs to be done is, and we definitely advocate, is diversity and inclusion through all levels of the construction process, not only just in the prime contractor, the subcontractor, but what we see and what's my experience personally has been is that a lot of your DBEs haven't experienced the mid-level and high-level jobs in your major corporations. A lot of construction companies are actually started by people who've worked for larger businesses for 5, 10 years, learn the planning, the financial expertise, the scheduling expertise that are needed to make the process and the job go smoothly. So when minorities and people that are disadvantaged aren't in those positions in majority corporations, when they go out to start new companies, a lot of those skills aren't there. So I think the DBE supportive services, things that they're in the federal program now, need to be taken advantage of more to help people that start their businesses with the tools to be successful. But then I think the diversity and inclusion, which AGC has a document that our board of directors has voted on and approved, that calls for diversity and inclusion throughout the process, not just meeting our DBE goals, but let's diversify our companies. Let's get more disadvantaged people or constituents through all levels of the construction processes, from engineers to architects to business owners to project managers, and I think that'll help the program be more successful over the future.
And how do we, you feel the federal government can bolster and support that effort to ensure that the disadvantaged can meet the criteria needed in order to compete?
Right. So I think the oversight that's being done now through the DBE program is a good starting point. I mean, obviously, you need to have certain financial stability and things of that nature. Right. So that would be one of my main ways. I think that I would suggest that.
Okay. Thank you. And Ms. McMillan, given all the new technological advances in transportation, such as with ride-sharing companies, how do we balance the new technology with local community needs, specifically with the potential displacement of local workforces?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, Congressman, and part of certainly what we're doing in the San Francisco Bay Area is aggressively bringing that consideration of impact on our historically underserved communities at the forefront of our planning. One of the things that we've recently engaged in, importantly, was a housing, very detailed 10-point plan housing analysis, referring back to what I observed before, that the housing and transportation demands in our communities are inextricably linked, including the challenge of gentrification or displacement around a new piece of transportation infrastructure that suddenly makes a neighborhood much more viable. One of the things included in there were tenant protections and policies to specifically speak to that need. The idea of identifying and preserving naturally affordable housing and not seeing it flip in terms of that development that's happening around the areas, ensuring that affordable housing is incorporated, not as a target, but a requirement as part of the development that happens in the areas around our transit stations. All of those elements need to come into play. I think importantly, we're also recognizing a one-size-fits-all doesn't really work in those circumstances. Understanding each community, we're seeing higher levels of poverty in our suburban areas, as well as traditionally urban, urbanized pockets of economic distress. So I think maybe the answer to your question is bringing this in at the front end of the planning process, not at the back end, is the best way of identifying the problems and coming up with the solutions and bringing the tools to bear to solve them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll yield back.